Let's talk Joe Barry, the Packers defensive coordinator, who has been there for 3 seasons. And the Packers have struggled on defense for a while. They're 27th in DVOA this past year, 25th the year before. Throughout this season, there have been some really tumultuous times. Towards the end of the year, when things were really rising to a boiling point, you saw Bryce Young have a career day. Baker Mayfield lit up the Packer defense. Tommy DeVito, who struggled, mightily in the games after, had his best game as a starting quarterback in the NFL. It felt like it was just, it felt like it could end at that point. And then the Packer defense sort of turns it around a bit. Weeks 15 through 18, they were 4th in rushing yards allowed per game allowed at 84.3 after being 31st with 141.8. And week 17 and 18 allowed the fewest points and yards per game in the National Football League. Granted, against Nick Mullins and the Vikings and Justin Fields and the Bears, but improvement. They went in, played okay against Dallas, good early on, started to sort of show those signs in the second half of the defense they really were most of this year. But this was something, we don't want to celebrate. Everyone you're going to hear is going to say this. We don't want to celebrate a coach being fired at all, especially not us Vikings fans who enjoyed the Packer collapses over the past couple of years on defense. But this was the right decision. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and there's a reason why the Packers are sort of clearing house. They have encouraged many other defensive coaches to find new jobs. And they also fired their strength and conditioning coach. So Packers fans who are angry about all the soft tissue injuries this year should feel optimistic things will get better there. I mean, look, Joe Barry could put together some good stretches. In the playoffs, I think he was a better game planner than people gave him credit for. But at defensive coordinator, you want somebody who is consistently giving you schematic edges, right? Someone who doesn't just have a game plan for a couple games a year, but consistently is able to outcoach the opposing offensive coordinator or opposing head coach. And Joe Barry just couldn't do that. He was running a scheme that didn't fit the Packers' strengths super well and couldn't adapt. And then even when things went pretty well, it always felt like they were just one play away from collapse. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting candidates this year, especially as defensive coordinators have struggled to get head coaching jobs. This has opened the opportunity for you to hire some really great minds in the NFL as defensive coordinators. So I think it makes sense to just mix it up and try someone new because you have so much talent on that defense. The results have to be better.
Yeah, the defense is loaded with first round picks there. And when you talk about all these candidates that there are, it's an enticing job in Green Bay. There was a chance that this was not a position people would covet. Just a couple months ago when they were 2-5, you're talking about a team where you're not even sure if Matt LaFleur could be around. They go on this run, and now for any defensive coach, you're looking at a team loaded with the first round picks, as we said, and on the offensive side of the ball, they're going to put up points. So all of a sudden, this turns into a position where maybe you can be contending for a Super Bowl right away if you make an impact. If you, as the defensive coordinator, can come in and have an impact similar to that of Brian Flores. Think about the Vikings just last year. That defense was horrendous a year ago. I mean, one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. And Brian Flores came in, and while they had their ups and downs, they were way better. I mean, we're talking, there was a stretch where the Vikings had one of the better defenses in the league for a few weeks. If you can get that sort of impact, now you're talking about a Super Bowl caliber team, which, assuming Jordan Love and the offense continue to progress, which a lot of people, unfortunately, expect them to. So let's talk about a couple of the candidates here. I asked you this before we started, and I'm just going to ask you the same question. Let's just say you're making the decision for the Packers, and I tell you, you can have any of the candidates you want. Like realistic, let's be realistic. Bill Belichick is not going to come in as a defensive coordinator. Who are you going to pick to be the defensive coordinator of the 2024 Green Bay Packers?
Of all the candidates who are available, I think there's a slam dunk hire. I'm not sure if the Packers will be able to get him, but there's a decent shot. Ejiro Evero out of Carolina. Things have it's been a clown fiesta in Carolina. There's a new head coach coming in who is probably going to want their own defensive coordinator. But we're talking about a guy who transformed the defense in Denver. I mean, you saw how bad they looked when he left. And despite all of the Panthers' offensive struggles this year, the defense was actually pretty good. He
Yeah.
runs a similar system. He runs that like Fangio too high shell type system, so players won't have to learn something entirely new. But he's had much better results with it in the past than Joe Barry. So I think if you're able to get absolutely anyone who's available, that's the slam dunk choice, and that's probably the name that's going to be number one on the Packers list.
He actually was the defensive quality control coach in Green Bay in 2016. So there are some ties formerly to the Packers. It's funny you talk about him, possibly having to stick around with whatever head coach comes into Carolina. He could be that head coach. He's interviewing there. He's interviewing with the Falcons and the Seahawks. Ejiro Evero is someone very highly respected around the NFL. I can see him becoming a head coach and not being an option for Green Bay. So he feels like someone that, to me, I think he fits really well. I don't expect him to be available. A lot of Packer fans are going to talk about this guy, Wink Martindale, who left the Giants with not really great. Not when I say left the Giants, I mean it was not a good breakup between the two of them. He was sort of thrown out of there. But you look at what he's done in New York. I know this year was a little rocky, but great turnaround immediately last season. And the Ravens, his units were first in yards and second in points in 2018, fourth in yards and third in points in 2019, and seventh in yards and second in points in 2020, before falling to 25th in yards and 19th in points in 2021 when he left. This is someone who's been around the league a lot, works very well with linebackers, where the Packers are loaded with people. I think this is a guy who can come in and make a big difference right off the bat, and should certainly be in that top tier of contenders for the job.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question, right? You talk about the Giants. I get that he didn't have the best year necessarily, but he left mostly because he was sick of working with them. The Giants tied Baltimore with the most forced turnovers in football this year. And let me tell you, the Giants defense did not have the same talent as Baltimore. There's no Kyle Hamilton in New Jersey. But yeah. Wink Martindale is
there was no Kyle Hamilton when he was there.
No, what I mean is what I mean is he tied with Baltimore this year for most forced turnovers.
Oh,
sorry. And he didn't have the same talent that Baltimore did this year.
My bad, yeah.
Yeah, in 2018 and 2021, there was no Kyle Hamilton, but they also produced results. The thing I like about Wink Martindale is he's been in the NFL for a really long time, and he nevertheless consistently produces edges with schematics. He's one of the most creative defensive coordinators we've seen in the past 20 or 30 years in the NFL. Every year he comes out with new blitz packages that confuse the opposing quarterbacks, right? He is constantly generating pressure. Occasionally that leads to big plays. That's true, but more often than not, it doesn't. And he's able to compensate for it with typically decent run defense and a whole bunch of forced turnovers. So if you're talking about a guy who's able, with basically any group of players, to come in and immediately generate an impact, he's your guy.
Yeah, and the Packers struggled to generate turnovers this year. They only had 18. That's 23rd in the NFL. The pass rush struggled a lot this year, even though they came on at the end. In many ways, as dangerous as it could be to have an aggressive coach, because, yeah, you do allow some bigger plays. It's fun when you have someone who's just throwing blitzes and you're intercepting the ball. At times that wins you games. When it can cost you, sometimes it's refreshing to see that after having a more of a laid back defense that gets picked apart. Trust me, I'm telling you from this past Vikings year. Yes, we'll be just a little bit quicker on these candidates here. But Mike Zimmer is someone who I know a lot of Packers fans have mentioned. They know him well. He was with the Vikings for so long. We know him well. Zimmer. Look, he's one of the best head coaches the Vikings have ever had, even though there was turmoil there at times. Mike Zimmer's going to come in. He doesn't take shit from anybody. like Mike Zimmer will come in and there will be an edge to that Packer defense. I don't know how well him and LaFleur get along. He's also getting older, but he said in an interview recently, "I love to teach, love to coach." He's been studying apparently. I think Mike Zimmer is someone who could come in. And it would go one of two ways. It would either be beautiful in Green Bay, and we're talking about a defense where you have people, he's known for the double A gap blitzes. You'd have people disguising, go get him a safety to work with, like Harrison Smith, which way easier said than done. But Mike Zimmer could have fun with this Packer defense. On the other hand, can't you imagine a scenario where Mike Zimmer comes in and he's grouchy, doesn't get along with people, and next thing you know, it's blowing up and he's gone mid-season?
Yeah, I worry a lot about the Zimmer talk because, Paul, you remember watching the Vikings defense. It was very, very good for most of his tenure, but towards the end,
Fell apart.
he was starting to get old, right? And I get that he had a whole lot of other responsibilities going on that weren't going super well, but he spent almost all his time with the defense, and the defense stopped being good. I
Yeah.
worry that he's lost some of that edge he's had when he was younger. Unlike a guy like Wink Martindale, who's also pretty old and been around for the long time, but has consistently produced results even this year. So if I'm looking for somebody has been out of football for a while, Leslie Frazier, I think, is a more exciting candidate there.
No, the
People
former
forget how
Viking
good
head
Leslie
coach.
Frazier's defenses were of the Bills, Paul. People forget.
I know. So maybe Leslie Frazier seems like one of the nicest guys in the world, by the way. When you listen to him talk, I have nothing against Leslie Frazier. I just remember I can't get out of my head those Vikings teams, which we weren't very talented, to be fair to Leslie. And I know he had success with Buffalo. He did wind up he didn't get fired, but they didn't bring him back at the end of his time there.
Well, after he had, I mean, if there's the thing he will be remembered for the rest of his career is 13 seconds.
Yeah, I mean that's it's tough. It's tough when you have the 13-second game because if they win that, they very well might win the Super Bowl that year, which it's just an unfortunate end for him. That's not the direction I would go. Let's bring up just two more guys here, then we'll move on. A lot of people are mentioning Jim Leonard, the former Wisconsin defensive coordinator, interim head coach there for a very short tenure. He's a senior football analyst at Illinois right now. Someone that the Packers actually offered the job to when LaFleur was looking for a replacement for Mike Pettin, and he said no. Then they were between Evero and Joe Barry. They wound up going with Joe Barry. Looks like the wrong decision now in hindsight. But Jim Leonard's someone people are going to be paying attention to. Another really aggressive style defensive coordinator where a lot of man-to-man. He's going to be sending people. You're going to have big plays against you. You're also going to force a lot of big plays. I'm not sure, given where this team is right now, I'd want to go in that direction. A lot of Packer fans are probably going to love him, being a Wisconsin guy, but it feels like more of a gamble than some of these other candidates.
He has no coaching experience in the NFL, which means it's very difficult to know exactly how it's going to turn out. I will say this, here's the thing about the Packers defense that seemed true is particularly Jair Alexander had a pretty hard time, obviously, connecting with the coaches. Jim Leonard is a guy who, by all accounts, when he comes in, everyone loves him. So if you're looking for a guy to sort of establish a culture where people are excited to come into work, they're ready to work hard, they're ready to play their best, he could be a good choice. And again, because he's never coached in the NFL, you don't know what you're going to get, good or bad. So there's definitely a possibility there. Again, there's a reason they offered him the job in the first place, right? Again, I just think on the current market with the current defensive coordinators, there are guys who have proven themselves a little bit more. Those will be more ideal candidates, in my opinion.
I agree. Look, he could be a slam dunk, but I agree. And the last guy, because I know this isn't a Packer defensive coordinator show, but Al Harris, the defensive backs coach for the Cowboys, obviously all you Packers fans know him from the times he used to torture the Vikings. He's one of the first guys I remember watching is Al Harris, and that long hair, just an iconic Packer player in my memory. Someone I actually always kind of liked along the Packers teams with so many guys I didn't enjoy watching. But Al Harris, look at Trayvon Diggs, look at Deron Bland. He's turning these guys into playmakers, doing a good job with that Dallas secondary. He could be really valuable in Green Bay with Jair, Stokes, these a couple other young corners there. But again, another guy, never a defensive coordinator, feels like it might be a little early there, but someone the fan base loves and would get behind.
Yeah, it feels to me like he was just playing in the NFL. He's actually been coaching for over a decade. And let's not forget when he played, he has a huge diverse background in the NFL, right? He played for Jim Johnson. He played for Steve Spagnuolo. Like he's played with a lot of these great defensive coordinators and hopefully internalized some of those lessons. Oh, sure. If you're looking for a guy who's on the up and up, right, and who knows Green Bay, who's beloved by the fans, hire who will at least be a hit with the fans. If nothing else, he's a good choice. I'd be really excited to see what he could do. Again,
it
as
would
you
be
say,
exciting for the
you just
the fan base
worry
would
when
love
what you're asking for after what we've seen from Jordan Love in the offense. You don't need the defense to carry you in games. You just need them to be functional. There's a lot of risk there.
But man, that would be fun. I would love to see what Al Harris could do with that Packer defense, and the fan base would be thrilled. So let us know in the comment section, Packer fans, which doesn't necessarily have to be one of the guys we mentioned. If there's someone else you like, let us know.
How about Brandon Staley?
Brandon Staley.
Brandon Staley.
There are a lot of great candidates out there this season.